Welcome back to the channel, Plooper Troops, and if you're new to the channel, welcome to Break the Backlog, the show where I sit down and provide my thoughts, opinions, and personal stories about a particular game that I have played and completed. Today we're going to be talking about another Switch game that has been sitting collecting dust on my Switch shelf until last year in 2023 when I decided to dust it off and try it, Pokémon Violet. I bought this game on launch day, and this was the first time that I was hyped about a mainline Pokemon game in quite a while. Don't get me wrong, I have owned or own all of them, but I was really excited for this one. Pokemon Sword just didn't seem to grab me as much as this one did for whatever reason, but after it received lukewarm reviews at launch and a lot of criticism for its shortcomings, I kind of just allowed those narratives to talk me into putting this game down for a while. That was until I decided to pick it up again for my streaming series, which I ended up ending and then just continued to play on my own time last year. I have been a lifelong Pokemon fan, and as such, I felt it necessary to play this game through and see if Pokemon Violet was as bad as some say it was, or if it was as fun as the hype initially led me to believe. Real quick, if you want to watch me play some video games with my best friend and fellow YouTuber Backpack Comics, go check out our new side project channel called Dad's Fighting, where we let's play games in the old two friends on the couch style of early YouTube, as well as our occasional podcast where we talk about all things video games, with or without guests. With that out of the way, sit back, relax, grab a little snack, and let's break the backlog on Pokemon Violet. The Pokemon games way back when had pretty simple narratives, in that the player is a Pokemon trainer who leaves with a starting Pokemon on a big journey to defeat the gyms and become the Pokemon champion. Along the way, they fight with a rival, as both parties grow stronger and continue to push each other, encounter a legendary Pokemon, and usually tango with some kind of criminal organization along the way. These are the main pillars of what makes a Pokemon game at its core, and while the series has expanded on this narrative front and some cool battling gimmicks throughout the years, the Pokemon franchise as a whole has centered on these building blocks. Pokemon Violet does feature these pillars, but much like with many of the recent entries in the series, it does its best to add its own unique flavor to them. Pokemon Violet takes place in the Paldea region, a region based off of real-world Spain and Portugal. Players take on the role of a new student entering the Uva Academy, or Naranja if you chose Scarlet, and the intro to these games is as classic as ever, as we start in our house that we live in with our mother. We still get to choose our starter from a group of 3 Pokemon that represent the ever-classic type triangle of Fire, Water, and Grass, and then we meet our rival who we set off on our journey to school with. We do encounter the legendary here in the beginning of the game, which then joins our party, which I thought was an interesting choice considering that we typically learn about the legendary throughout the course of the game before encountering them towards the end. From here, we head off to school where we settle in and then are faced with the Treasure Hunt, an open-ended assignment for students to explore the world of Paldea in search of their treasure or something that means something to them. Our treasure hunt features 3 different paths that we can choose to go on in any order that we want, but we must complete all of to finish the quote-unquote finish the narrative, so to say. Victory Road, the Path of Legends, and Starfall Street. Victory Road sees us take on the classic Pokemon staple of defeating 8 gym leaders to earn the right to challenge the Elite Four and eventually become the champion. The journey sees our student accompanied by battle-addicted and energetic Nemona, who serves as our character's rival. At first, I found Nemona to be sort of annoying, but by the end of Victory Road, I felt like I had gone on a long journey with her, and the payoff of her friendship and rivalry with the player character felt really heartwarming. The gyms covered a wide range of Pokemon types and had some interesting characters, and with the new terrestrialization mechanic that we'll cover a bit later, I found myself having to make some thoughtful additions to my team sometimes. The rivalry that we have with Nemona and some minor interactions with Elite Four members and the champion throughout the story offer some pretty minimal narrative, but this simple approach made a nostalgic and cozy space to play in for a long-time Pokemon player. The Path of Legends is a story of hunting down legendary herbs known as the Herba Mystica and fighting off the giant Titan Pokemon that feed upon them for strength. This journey is accompanied by Arven and serves as our way of healing and restoring power to our injured legendary friend from earlier, Miraidon. Arven is a stubborn and quick-to-annoy kid when we first meet him, but throughout the Path of Legends narrative, we see him unravel and find that he is just a lost boy who desperately wants to help a lifelong companion. This was pretty neat and a cool way to fill us in about some of the lore of Paldea while also giving us a way to power up Miraidon for further exploration. The world really opens up when Miraidon can use all of its traversal abilities, and as such, there is a reason to continue hunting down these massive titans and the special oregano that they protect. Much like with Nemona, I found myself kind of hating Arven at the start, but he really grew on me throughout the story, and I actually really liked his development by the end. Finally, we have Starfall Street, which is the last path I finished in my playthrough. Narratively, I thought that the story of how Team Star came to be was really interesting and sad, and it kind of covered some really important themes I think for the younger audience that these games target, but gameplay-wise, which we will get into, this was my least favorite of the storylines. This one is accompanied by Director Clavel, who leads the Academy, but he's disguised as Clive, and the mysterious Cassiopeia, who communicates with us via phone throughout the path as we exact her plan to take down Team Star. I know these games are for kids, but it just kind of felt like this plotline was really predictable. The twist just wasn't twisty enough. Also, this kind of just felt like battling Gym Leaders Light Edition, but we'll get into that like I said before when we talk about the gameplay. This narrative had some cool messaging about bullying and stuff, as I said before, but ultimately it just fell kind of flat for me. At its core, this is Pokemon through and through, but I felt that the decision to let the player choose when and where to tackle what they are doing and where they are going in whatever order that they want really helped open up the experience into feeling more of like what an adventure in the Pokemon world would probably be like. Being able to tackle the gyms as you see fit helps account for the different starter choices, for instance, and using the Herba Mystica helps us get to these places faster by unlocking the latent traveling potential of Miraidon. Once these paths are all completed, our character teams up with companions from each storyline to enter Area Zero. In Pokemon Violet, this informs the player of the futuristic-like Pokemon we have seen throughout the game's true origin, which I won't spoil as I know that some of you may not have tried this game. Just know that overall this is a Pokemon story with some unique aspects to it, and the ending portion was an exciting and surprising way to wrap everything up that felt pretty earned. Alright, so here's where we're going to get into some of the complaints that were levied against this game when it first launched. Pokemon Violet is pretty rough looking, which really sucks because I got the feeling that the devs were trying to show off this awesome open world that they had made, and instead of it being breathtaking, a lot of it is just downright ugly sometimes. Pop-In is pretty bad, and I constantly found myself running into Pokemon while riding on Miraidon that I didn't want to battle, but because they simply appeared in my path, it was too late for me to maneuver around them. There's also the hilarious and well-documented 5 frames per second character animations when you are a certain distance away from NPC characters, and there's also a point in the intro of the game where the intro becomes less of a cutscene and more just screenshots with accompanied text. This felt like the team was just like, animation is hard halfway through, or that they ran out of time and just couldn't finish the cutscenes. A lot of the criticism regarding the game's visuals is totally valid and justified, which is a real shame. This level of unpolished should be unacceptable, and is even more hard to ignore when considering that Pokemon is the top grossing pop culture franchise of all time. The visuals were really disappointing here, though that isn't to say that there weren't some things that I enjoyed visually. I thought that the new Pokemon designs were really sick and unique, and that was one of the things that initially got me really hyped for the game. This was the first Pokemon game in a while that I thought the base evolution of each of the starters looked well designed and intriguing. I felt like I couldn't really make a decision between the 3 of them at first. The same cannot be said for at least one of the final evolutions.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
I don't even know how they messed this up so bad. This sucks. This might be one of the worst starter designs of all time in terms of evolutions and payoff. If I chose the little duck and this is what I got at the end, yeah, I would hate this game. I hate this design. And I know that's a subjective thing, but this is horrible. This is horrible. Can we agree this is horrible? Another thing that stuck out was the choice to use screenshot stills in the intro cutscenes like I talked about before, rather than just fully animating the scenes all the way through, which implies that maybe this game was not done, and to make the release date, corners were definitely cut to get the game out in time. This is unfortunately not a problem unique to Pokemon, but it is present here. Other than the aforementioned Pokemon designs, I felt that the visuals were pretty bad and they left a lot to be desired here. As for the sound portion of the presentation, I did think that the soundtrack was pretty decent, at least inoffensive overall, with the exception of one song. The song that plays when Professor Turo is on screen is so annoying. I get that they were going for like a robotic, sci-fi, funky tune, but this song just sounds like they body slammed someone into a synthesizer, and it really grated on me every time he popped up to reread Miraidon's power that we unlocked, despite the game already telling us what it was. I hate this song with a passion, and I'll be happy that I don't have to hear it for a really long time, if ever again. Aside from that, this was a pretty run-of-the-mill Pokemon soundtrack, with no songs really hitting that sweet Gen 3 or 4 level for me, so it was just okay. Voice acting is really easy to talk about, as once again there is none. I know that to some this is a huge oversight, but I don't mind it all that much. Overall, the presentation is pretty below average. While the soundtrack is decent and inoffensive aside from the assault on the ears that is Professor Turo's theme, the presentation as a package is severely held back by the poor graphics that are chocked full of bugs and overall ugliness that this title just has baked into it at its core. Just to summarize what we talked about before, those pillars that I mentioned earlier are still alive and well in this title. There are still 8 gyms, an Elite Four, and a champion, a team of goofsters causing a ruckus, and a quest to obtain, or rather heal, a legendary Pokemon. The thing that's cool about Scarlet and Violet is that the game split these 3 storylines into separate paths and let the player choose the order that they engage in them. I thought that from a longtime Pokemon fan's perspective, this was a really good and modern take on the nostalgic series. I enjoyed a break from the linearity of earlier titles and felt like I could travel the world and catch so many different types of Pokemon to make my team feel unique. Something that I disliked about older Pokemon titles is that because of the linearity of when we can visit different parts of the game and find different Pokemon, many starting teams feel the exact same. We always have generic rodents or birds on our team at the beginning of older games because we don't have a ton of choices, and I felt that by opening up the world, I could go and hunt down typings that typically take longer to encounter, like Ice or Dragon. I also found that this made team building incredibly difficult in Pokemon Violet in the best way possible, as I was constantly finding Pokemon that I loved, or new ones that were intriguing and awesome looking, and I was forever swapping my teammates in and out because I just couldn't decide what to use. I think the Paldea Pokedex choices were really solid and offered some awesome replayability options for different teams. I also found that the vast variety of different Pokemon found here led me to wanting to explore more and more of the massive map of Paldea in search of as many Pokemon as I could possibly find. The various storylines all contain some aspect of gameplay mix-up as well. Victory Road swaps out the tried and true gym formula of battling lackeys leading up to the leader, and while you still may battle some trainers, many of the new gym challenges have you doing all sorts of things that build upon the lore of Paldea. You may be doing really normal and mundane things like buying things at an auction for a famous chef, or kicking a giant olive into a basket to bring good luck to the olive harvest. But while some of these are just kind of dumb and easy, the story building is a nice touch that helps us understand what sort of cities are found in Paldea and what the cultural landscape looks like. The Path of Legends was an interesting Bigfoot hunt which I found to be a decent experience overall. Tracking down the massive Titan Pokemon was cool, but it did get tiresome overall after completing all of these boss fights back to back. This isn't to say that I didn't enjoy the overall narrative of helping Arven out, it's just sort of lost its cool factor after a while. I would like to see this kind of built upon in the future, but maybe applied to legendaries, kind of like hunting down the legendary dogs in Soul Silver and Heart Gold. Hearing rumors and reading textbooks could be added to really give it that research feel, and while I think that Game Freak will never put that kind of effort into these games, it just made me want them to kind of implement more interesting paths into their future games, and maybe they will continue to build upon this concept. I doubt it, but hopefully, there's always that hope, right? That's what we hold on to is painful hope with Pokemon. Once again, going back to Starfall Street, the main gimmick, I guess, here is just using the Let's Go mechanic to take down 30 of their base trainers' Pokemon to piss off the leader enough that they reveal themselves. This one got old really quickly, and it's just kind of pointless. It really feels like gameplay padding. Also, from a gameplay aspect, taking on Team Star just feels like tacking on 5 extra gems on without the interesting Terra type choices, or man, I would have even preferred some of the dumb lore building puzzles to just let's going my way through what felt like I said, extra padding added to the game. Now, as I said before, I thought the Team Star story was okay, if not predictable, but from a gameplay perspective, this was pretty boring stuff. Aside from the main storylines and these 3 pathways, there's also some collectibles to find throughout the game in both Gimmighoul coins that allow you to evolve the named Pokemon Gimmighoul, and stakes in the ground that when collected allow the player to face 4 hidden legendaries known as the Ruinous Pokemon. These inclusions did aid with the exploration feeling a bit stale, but in my opinion they ultimately were just not enough for me to go out of my way to find all of them because the aforementioned barrenness of the open world. As for Pokemon battling, the new gimmick around this time is Terastallization. This allows players to unlock a crystallized version of their Pokemon which assigns them 1 typing and boosts the power of those type moves. The cool thing about Terastallization is that you can find some really weird Terra types out there. I had an Appleton that was Ice Terra typed on my final team, for instance, and these weird Terra types are the most important trainers like gym leaders, bosses, and Elite Four members' ace Pokemon. A Ghost type gym leader may bring out a Pokemon who is a fighting type with Ghost Terra typing. This allows it to cover Ghost's dark weakness, which makes team strategy even more important here. From a gameplay side, I really like this mechanic despite how dumb some of the crystals look on top of the Pokemon's heads, because it really mixed up the battle formula and led to some really tough fights sometimes. This was also featured in Terra raid battles, which are found all over the map and give the player some unique opportunities to catch some really cool Pokemon with interesting Terra typings. I think these raids were kind of found in Pokemon Sword and Shield, and they're basically just big boss fights in which you and a party of other players or AI trainers take on a Pokemon with a specific Terra typing. They also provide a large boost and experience through rewarding the player with XP candies to use on their party, which I did find helpful with staying on level with the gyms, and they also give you some more like little bits and pieces that you can collect. Now, with the recording of this video, the last time I picked this game up was in late 2023, and I had just entered the post game. Maybe I'll make another video about that experience, but overall, I will say that gameplay is somewhat of a mixed bag here. The Pokemon choices feel vast and varied and really had me struggling to build a team in the best way possible. I always felt like it was hard to be 100% happy with a team because there was always a new Pokemon around the corner to add or swap. The gym experience felt good in this game, and I felt like the new Terastallization mechanic mixed up the gameplay and made strategy a little more important. I also found myself wanting to explore Paldea in search of new Pokemon and Terra-type combos to play with, and I thoroughly enjoyed getting this open world where I could choose how to tackle the different paths of the game. On the positive side, this felt like a break away from the linear stories of past games and really felt like what journeying around in an adventurous Pokemon world would feel like. On the other hand, the bugs here were sometimes funny and other times were really annoying. For instance, there were times where I would jump on Miraidon's back and set off into a body of water just for him to sink all the way to the bottom of that body of water and not return to the surface. The game would kind of unstick me, but then Miraidon would just swim at 2 miles per hour instead of his normal quick speed. I also didn't feel like all the storylines completely gelled with me, and sometimes it just felt like these, quote, new mechanics were just recycled gameplay with new narratives stapled onto them. Like how the Team Star bosses were basically just gym leaders, and the Titan Pokemon were kind of just like Terra raids that you do with Arven instead of with a party of other trainers. There is definitely some potential here, but the lack of polish strikes once again, and some of the inclusions felt like just gameplay padding rather than new gameplay or a fresh experience. Pokemon Violet is a game that had me feeling split right down the middle at one point. I felt like the new Pokemon, Pokedex inclusions, open world, and battle mechanics are all fun and strong choices. However, the various graphical and gameplay bugs, mundane gameplay and bits of the different paths, and lack of polish that I mentioned before really hindered my enjoyment at times. Pokemon Violet is one of the buggiest and at times ugliest modern releases that I have played. It's also one of the most fun Pokemon experiences that I've had when all of the gameplay is firing on all cylinders. This has left me with feelings of hope that Game Freak will continue to build on what went well here and fix what did not. But it's really hard for me to nail my feelings of Pokemon Violet onto the positive or even neutral side of the spectrum because of the objective poor quality of the presentation in juxtaposition to how much fun I found myself having enjoying the process of beating this game. My playing habits with this game kind of reflected that. There were times that I needed to step away from the game. I got annoyed. It just became kind of a grind or a slog and just wasn't fun. But I always found myself looking forward to sitting down at the end of a work shift and playing Pokemon Violet. Sometimes when I was slogging through bits of the game that wasn't enjoyable, I did feel like I was just simply pushing through for the sake of just finishing this game to say that I finished it. And other times I was having a lot of fun hunting down Pokemon and watching these new Pokemon evolve and figuring out what their next form looked like. And that felt very nostalgic to me. In closing, I guess that whether or not Game Freak will truly hear any of the criticism from the fans remains to be seen. After all, with the state of modern gaming being more focused on appeasing investors and less about what fans want, and this also being the highest selling Pokemon game of all time, there is definitely reason to believe that they really won't care and they'll just continue pushing out unpolished messes of games. I would say wait to get Pokemon Scarlet or Violet on a sale if you're unsure, but I've yet to see these games drop below $54 US, so I'll just say that if you love Pokemon, there is some fun to be had here. And if you're unsure, maybe watch some other reviews and build a general sense of whether or not you're willing to pay retail price for a game that is kind of this buggy, while also being a decent amount of fun. Ultimately, it's really hard for me to recommend these games at their current and frequent price point. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please subscribe and leave a like, as this always helps out the channel. Till the next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and peace.